The Darsal were once a proud, peaceful species. Their homeworld, Darsithia, was a beautiful planet filled with towering crystal forests and vast, peaceful oceans. The Darsal had achieved great technological advancement, yet they had never been interested in war or conflict. They believed in peaceful solutions and cooperation with other species. They had always stayed neutral, choosing not to involve themselves in the political struggles that tore other civilizations apart. But the galaxy did not see the Darsal's neutrality as a blessing. Instead, it saw them as weak, as indifferent, and as a species that refused to choose sides. The powerful empires of the galaxy, the Vectrons and the Tharvok Dominion, were always fighting over territory, resources, and influence. In their eyes, the Darsal were no different from those who refused to pick a side. They viewed the Darsal's refusal to participate in these battles as betrayal. The situation began when the Vectron Empire and the Tharvok Dominion started a war over the control of a strategically important star system. The Darsal, as always, chose to remain neutral. They refused to support either side, thinking that peace could eventually come from negotiation. But the larger empires did not appreciate this. To them, neutrality was a weakness. They saw it as an insult to their efforts and to the lives of their soldiers. In response to the Darsal's neutrality, both empires turned their backs on them. Trade deals were canceled. Diplomatic ties were severed. At first, the Darsal did not understand. They had always helped others, shared knowledge, and built alliances. Why were they being punished for staying out of a war they had no interest in? But it soon became clear the galaxy was punishing them for choosing peace. Soon, Darsal colonies that had once been thriving hubs of learning and culture became isolated and cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The once bustling trade routes to Darsithia were now blocked. No ships came to deliver food, resources, or supplies. Darsithia's atmosphere, once rich with life and energy, began to weaken. Crops failed, and the planet's energy resources began to dwindle. The Darsal were not a violent species. Their bodies were small, fragile, and lacking in strength compared to many other alien races. Their most advanced technology, while impressive, was focused on science, healing, and peaceful exploration, not on weapons. They were experts in medicine, energy technology, and diplomacy. But in the galaxy's eyes, these things meant little when war was at the forefront. For months, the Darsal sent out distress calls to every corner of the galaxy, hoping that someone would come to their aid. They reached out to the Galactic Council, to nearby species, and to the few allies they had left. But their messages were ignored. The great empires of the galaxy turned away from them, seeing their plight as a minor issue that did not deserve attention. The Darsal were no longer considered valuable. They had no army to offer, no resources that the galaxy needed, and they had refused to take sides in the war. They were now nothing more than a forgotten race, left to wither away on their dying world. As the months dragged on, the Darsal began to lose hope. The once beautiful crystal forests of Darsithia faded into decay. The skies above the planet grew dim, as if the planet itself was mourning the fate of its people. It was then, in their darkest hour, that the unexpected happened. From the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a new signal came through: human. The Terrans, a relatively young species from a planet called Earth, had picked up the Darsal's distress call. They had no reason to help, no ties to the Darsal, but they had heard of their plight. They knew what had happened to the Darsal, and something within them refused to turn away. The humans had been exploring the outer rim of space when they intercepted the Darsal's desperate signal. Captain Elias Carter of the U.S. Endeavour had heard about the Darsal's isolation, and he immediately made the decision to investigate. Unlike the powerful empires of the galaxy, the Terrans did not view the Darsal as a weak or insignificant race. They saw them as victims of a galactic system that favored war and conflict over peace. To humanity, every life mattered. Captain Carter, known for his compassion and sense of justice, gathered a small fleet of ships. They were a mix of civilian explorers and military personnel, all unified by a common goal: to help the Darsal. Carter believed that the galaxy could not stand by and watch as a peaceful species was left to die. He believed that humanity had a responsibility to act, no matter the consequences. The Terran fleet, led by Captain Carter, set course for Darsithia. But as they drew closer, they realized that they were not just going to save a few survivors. They were going to help an entire species rebuild. The Darsal had been abandoned by the galaxy, but humanity would show them that they were not alone. And so, the Terrans began their journey, not to conquer, not to claim, but to offer a hand of friendship in a galaxy that had turned its back on the Darsal. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where humanity would prove that standing for what was right could change the future of the galaxy itself. The Terran fleet moved quietly through the stars, guided only by the faint signal of the Darsal's distress call. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the U.S. Endeavor, his eyes fixed on the view ahead. The dark expanse of space stretched out before him, silent and vast. Behind him, the crew of the Endeavor worked quickly, their movements efficient but filled with a sense of urgency. They knew what was at stake. Humanity was taking a stand, and they would not back down. As they approached the Darsal home system, the crew could see the toll the galaxy's neglect had taken. The once vibrant planet of Darsithia now appeared as a shadow of itself. The crystal forests, which had once shimmered like jewels in the sun, now lay in ruin. The oceans, once full of life, seemed still and empty. It was a place that had been forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, abandoned to wither. But humanity, led by Captain Carter, would not let it stay that way. "Captain, we're entering the Darsal system," said Lieutenant Tessa Moore, a member of Carter's command crew. She glanced at the readouts on her console, her brow furrowed with concern. "There's no sign of enemy ships, but their communications are down. We won't be able to reach them directly." Captain Carter nodded, his expression serious. "Prepare to make contact, Lieutenant. We don't know what we'll find when we get there. Stay alert, everyone." The fleet moved forward cautiously, making their way toward the planet. As they drew closer, they could see the damage more clearly. There were no trade ships, no bustling spaceports, no signs of the life that once thrived here. The only ships in orbit around the planet were a handful of ancient Darsal vessels, small, weak, and barely functional. The fleet sent out a message, a simple signal that announced their arrival. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the U.S. Endeavor." The message broadcasted across the stars. "We come in peace and offer assistance. We are here to help." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, it seemed as if their message would go unheard, just like all the others the Darsal had sent in the past. But then, slowly, a faint signal came through. The Darsal were responding. "Captain, we have a response," Lieutenant Moore said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "It's coming from the surface." Captain Carter's eyes widened slightly. The Darsal had not given up, even after all this time. They had been abandoned by the rest of the galaxy, but they still held on, waiting for someone to answer their call. "Put it through," Carter ordered. The screen in front of him flickered for a moment. Then a small, fragile-looking figure appeared. It was a Darsal, but unlike any human had ever seen before. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and their eyes shimmered with an ethereal glow. The Darsal's voice was soft, almost hesitant. We never thought anyone would come," the Darsal said in a quiet voice. "The galaxy, it has abandoned us. We are alone. Please, if you are here to help, we welcome you." Captain Carter's heart softened. These were the words he had hoped to hear. Humanity had not come to conquer or demand anything. They had come simply to help. "We're here to save your people," Carter said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. "We will do everything we can to help you rebuild. You are not alone anymore." The Darsal's expression softened, a mixture of relief and gratitude flooding their face. "Thank you," they whispered, tears welling up in their eyes. "You are the first to show us kindness in so long." Captain Carter felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was the moment they had worked for, the moment humanity could show the galaxy what it stood for. The Darsal were not a forgotten race. They were not weak or insignificant. They were a people worthy of respect, of protection, and of a second chance. "We will get you the help you need," Carter assured the Darsal. "We have the resources and the technology to help you rebuild your ships, restore your planet, and bring your people to safety. Just tell us what you need." The Darsal nodded, their eyes wide with disbelief. We have been stranded for so long, we don't know where to begin. Our technology is damaged. Our ships are too old to fly. We don't even have enough food to survive." Captain Carter looked over at his crew, his mind already racing with solutions. They had limited resources, but humanity had always found ways to make the most of what they had. They were problem solvers, survivors, and they were willing to work with the Darsal, not just for them. "We'll start by getting you food and medical supplies," Carter said. "We'll help you repair your ships and get you to a safe location where we can begin the rebuilding process. And we'll find a way to communicate with the rest of the galaxy, so you're never abandoned again." The Darsal looked at Carter, their face filled with hope. "You truly mean it. You're not abandoning us like the others." "We're not going anywhere," Carter replied. "You're part of the galaxy now. And we'll make sure the galaxy knows you're here." For the first time in what felt like forever, the Darsal smiled. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was enough to fill the hearts of the Terran crew with hope. They were not just helping a species, they were changing the fate of the galaxy itself. The arrival of the Terran fleet did not go unnoticed. Word spread quickly through the galaxy about the humans' daring move to help the Darsal. And not just any word, angry, threatening word. The galactic powers, especially the Vectron Empire and the Tharvok Dominion, were watching closely. To them, the Darsal were nothing more than a pawn in the larger struggle for control, and humanity's interference was an unacceptable challenge to the balance of power they had worked so hard to create. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Captain Elias Carter stood watching the communications panel. Lieutenant Moore, sitting beside him, was already reading through the many messages that had arrived from the galaxy's major powers. "Captain, the Vectron Empire has sent a formal warning. They demand that we cease all aid to the Darsal immediately, or face severe consequences," Moore said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "The Tharvok Dominion has sent something similar." Carter clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing as he read the messages. Both empires threatened to sanction humanity, restrict trade, and even cut diplomatic ties if they did not abandon the Darsal. The warnings were clear. Interfering with galactic affairs was dangerous. Helping the Darsal was seen as a provocation. "Any response from the Galactic Council?" Captain Carter asked, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of frustration. Moore hesitated before answering. "Nothing official, but some smaller species, like the Corellians and the Vair, have sent messages of support. They're watching us. They agree with our decision to help, but they don't have the power to stand with us." Carter nodded thoughtfully. He knew they were on their own. The larger empires held most of the power, and humanity was just a newcomer to the galactic stage. But Carter believed that humanity's strength didn't come from military might or political influence. It came from their values, from their refusal to turn away when others needed help. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Carter said, turning to his crew. "But we've made our decision. We will not abandon the Darsal. We will show the galaxy that standing for what is right is worth the cost." His words were met with nods of agreement. The crew of the Endeavor had already committed to this cause. They believed in what they were doing. They believed in helping the Darsal, and they would stand by their decision, no matter the consequences. The following days were filled with tension. The Endeavor continued to deliver supplies to the Darsal, and humanity worked tirelessly to assist in the rebuilding of Darsithia. Engineers from Earth helped repair the damaged Darsal ships, while medical teams set up facilities to care for the sick and injured. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope on Darcithia. But the galactic powers did not give up. They increased their pressure on humanity, sending messages filled with threats and warnings. The Vectron Empire made it clear that they would cut off all trade with Earth if they continued to aid the Darsal. The Tharvok Dominion spoke of military action, a quiet but unmistakable warning that they would not allow this rebellion to continue unchecked. Despite these threats, Captain Carter and his crew remained resolute. They knew that their actions were drawing the ire of powerful enemies, but they also knew that they were doing something far more important. They were showing the galaxy that humanity would not stand by in the face of injustice. One morning, as Captain Carter stood in his office aboard the Endeavour, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, urgent message. Lieutenant Moore's voice came through the comms, her tone serious. "Captain, we've just received word. The Vectron Empire has issued a formal declaration of war against humanity." Carter's heart skipped a beat. The Vectrons had been threatening war for days, but now it was official. The stakes had just become much higher. "Are we prepared for this?" Carter asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He knew the answer. The Endeavour was a powerful ship, but it was not equipped to fight an entire empire. Moore paused before answering. "We've had some diplomatic back channels open with the Corellians and the Vare. They've promised to offer support, but we can't count on them for military help just yet. We're mostly on our own for now." Captain Carter nodded, his mind racing. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. He had hoped the galaxy's leaders would see reason. But now, with war threatening on the horizon, he knew there was no turning back. "We can't afford to back down," Carter said quietly. "We're doing what's right, and no matter the cost, we won't abandon the Darsal." As Carter prepared to address his crew, a small flicker of hope appeared on the horizon. The Vectron Empire and the Tharvok Dominion had underestimated humanity. They had thought that humanity's young age in the galactic community would make them easy to manipulate, easy to bully. But what the galactic powers didn't understand was that humanity didn't respond to threats the way other species did. They didn't bend or break under pressure. They fought back. Captain Carter knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. The Endeavour was ready. Humanity was ready. They would stand firm, not just for the Darsal, but for their own values and for the future of the galaxy. The price of defiance was steep, but Captain Carter knew that it was a price worth paying. The declaration of war from the Vectron Empire shook the galaxy. For many, it felt like the balance of power was about to tip into chaos. The Tharvok Dominion, though not yet fully committed to military action, watched closely. Humanity was taking a bold stance, and the galaxy's great empires were not used to such defiance. But for Captain Elias Carter and the crew of the Endeavour, there was no turning back. They had already made their decision, to stand with the Darsal and help them rebuild, no matter the cost. The Terran fleet continued its mission, moving in and out of the Darsal system, delivering food, supplies, and engineers to aid in the restoration of the planet. The people of Darcithia, once abandoned and forgotten, now saw the first signs of hope. The Darsal, though still fragile, were beginning to rebuild their once great society. Their crystal forests, although slow to recover, started to regain their brilliance. The seas began to stir with life, and the ancient technology that had powered their world slowly came back online with the help of the humans. Captain Carter stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching as the work continued below. The atmosphere on the ship was tense, as the threat of war with the Vectrons loomed large, but there was a sense of determination. Carter had faced battles before, but this was different. This wasn't about military victory. It was about something deeper, something more important. Standing up for those who had no voice. "Captain, there's a message from the Vectron Empire," Lieutenant Moore reported, her voice low and serious. "They want us to surrender the Darsal. They're demanding that we cease all aid to the planet. If we don't, they'll consider it an act of aggression." Carter's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. "Send them a message back," he ordered. "Tell them we will not abandon the Darsal. We will continue to help them rebuild." There was a long silence before Moore spoke again. "Understood, Captain. But they're also mobilizing their fleet. If we don't back down, they will act." Carter's eyes hardened. "Then we'll be ready. We're not going to back down." He turned to his crew, who were gathered around him. "This is what we've prepared for. We have the Darsals back, and we're not letting the galaxy intimidate us." The crew nodded, and though they all knew that a war with the Vectrons would not be easy, they stood together, united in their mission. They had made a promise to the Darsal, and they intended to keep it. Over the next few days, the situation grew more tense. The Vectron fleet, a mighty force of warships, moved closer to the Darsal system. Captain Carter knew that the Vectrons would not waste time. If they saw the Endeavor and its fleet as a threat, they would attack without hesitation. The Terran fleet, though not as powerful as the Vectrons, had been prepared for this moment. The humans were quick thinkers, always ready to adapt. The Endeavor had already received upgrades to its defenses, with new shielding technology designed to withstand heavy bombardment. While they wouldn't be able to defeat the Vectrons head-on, they would be able to hold their ground long enough to give the Darsal time to escape. But the biggest concern was not the battle itself, it was what would happen after. If the Vectrons won, the Darsal would be lost forever. They would never be allowed to rebuild, never have a chance to rise from the ashes. Carter couldn't let that happen. As the Vectron fleet entered the Darsal system, Captain Carter made his decision. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're going to intercept them before they reach the planet. We'll do what we can to buy the Darsal more time." The crew moved quickly, setting the Endeavor and its accompanying ships in formation. The battle ahead would be fierce, but Carter knew it was a fight they had to win, not for the Terran fleet's survival, but for the survival of the Darsal. The first shot was fired just as the two fleets came into range. The Vectrons, with their superior firepower, unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy blasts aimed at the Terran ships. The Endeavor shuddered under the impact, but the upgraded shields held strong. It wasn't enough to stop the onslaught, but it was enough to keep them going. "We can't take this much longer, Captain," Lieutenant Moore shouted over the comms, her voice tense with urgency. "They're overwhelming us." "Hold on," Carter said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We're not backing down. Keep them distracted. The Darsal need time." The battle raged on, with the Terran fleet doing its best to stay one step ahead of the Vectrons. The Endeavor dodged and weaved, avoiding the worst of the Vectron fire, while sending out pulses of countermeasures and returning fire where possible. Each moment that they held their position was a victory in itself. But as the minutes dragged on, it became clear that the Vectrons wouldn't stop until they had crushed the Terran fleet. Captain Carter knew that if they didn't do something soon, the battle would be lost. And with it, the hope of saving the Darsal. The battle had stretched into hours, and the Terran fleet, led by the Endeavor, was slowly being pushed back. The Vectron Empire's superior ships were overwhelming, and the energy pulses from their weapons continued to strike with devastating accuracy. Yet the humans fought on, determined to protect the Darsal no matter the cost. Captain Elias Carter stood tall on the bridge of the Endeavor, his hands gripping the console as he watched the unfolding chaos outside. His face was set with determination, but there was a flicker of worry in his eyes. The battle had taken its toll. The Endeavor was damaged, its systems barely holding together. But even as the ship groaned and shuddered under enemy fire, Carter refused to retreat. "Captain, we can't keep up this pace," Lieutenant Moore said, her voice strained. "The Vectron fleet is too powerful. Our shields are failing, and our weapons are almost out of energy." Carter didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing, trying to find a solution. He couldn't let the Darsal down. He couldn't let humanity back down either. There had to be something they could do. "Captain, the Darsal ships are ready," Lieutenant Moore added. "They've repaired what they could, and they're asking for permission to assist us." Carter looked toward the screen, where a small group of Darsal ships hovered nervously, their once dying engines now humming with life. The Darsal may have been a fragile race, but they had proven their strength by surviving against impossible odds. They were ready to fight for their future, just as the Terrans were. "Permission granted," Carter said, his voice firm. "Tell them to stay close. We'll need every ship we can get." With the Darsal ships joining the battle, the tide began to shift. The Vectron fleet, though still dominant, was now facing a new threat. The Terran ships, with their ingenuity and the Darsal's advanced technology, fought with a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they danced around the Vectron fire, striking back with precision and skill. But just as things seemed to be turning in their favor, the unexpected happened. A large Vectron warship, the V-Prime, broke through the Terran defenses, unleashing a massive wave of destructive energy that ripped through the Endeavor's shields. Shields down to 30%. Lieutenant Moore shouted, "We can't take another hit like that." Captain Carter's heart raced. If the Endeavor fell, the Darsal's hope would be lost. He had no choice now but to make the ultimate decision. "Lieutenant, prepare the Endeavor to ram the V-Prime," Carter ordered, his voice steady. "We're going to take it down." The crew stared at him, shocked by the boldness of his command. The idea of sacrificing the Endeavor seemed unthinkable, but Carter knew that if they didn't act now, they would lose everything. "Captain, we don't have enough time to charge the engines for a direct hit," Moore protested, worry creeping into her voice. "We'll never make it." Carter's eyes locked with Moore's. "We don't need the engines. We'll use what we have left, our determination. We're doing this for the Darsal, for the future." With no time to spare, Carter took the helm himself. He ordered the crew to divert all remaining power to the ship's weapons and shields, putting everything on the line for one final attempt. The Endeavor surged forward, cutting through the chaos of the battle as the remaining Darsal ships provided cover. The Vectron V-Prime didn't expect the sudden assault. It was caught off guard as the Endeavor sped straight toward it, shields flaring from the impact of near misses, just as the Vectron ship aimed to fire its devastating weapon. The Endeavor slammed into its side with full force, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. "Impact," Moore shouted, her voice rising with excitement. "We've hit it. The V-Prime is disabled." For a moment, the battlefield went quiet. The V-Prime was now vulnerable, its weapon systems offline and shields flickering. The Terran fleet, along with the Darsal ships, wasted no time. They unleashed everything they had left, firing with precision and force. The Vectron fleet hesitated, unsure of their next move. The V-Prime was their flagship, and with its fall, their control of the battle had weakened. The tide of the fight began to shift once again. But the battle was far from over. The Vectrons were powerful, and their pride wouldn't let them back down easily. With a roar of engines, the remaining Vectron ships regrouped and launched a final push, aiming to destroy the weakened Terran fleet once and for all. "Captain, we can't sustain much more damage," Moore warned. "We need to retreat before they wipe us out." Carter looked out at the stars ahead. His heart was torn. The Endeavor had already given so much, and his crew had proven their courage and determination. But if they stayed any longer, they risked losing everything. "Pull back," he ordered, his voice heavy. "Tell the Darsal to make their way to safety. We've done all we can." The order to retreat was given. The Terran fleet, though battered, began to withdraw, protecting the Darsal as they moved toward the outskirts of the system. Carter watched as the Darsal ships, now stronger than before, sailed off into the distance, their future brighter than it had been in centuries. The price of their courage had been high, but humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. They had shown the galaxy that no one, no matter how small or weak, was ever truly alone. And no matter the consequences, they would stand for what was right. The Terran fleet had barely escaped the Vectron's final assault, their ships battered but still intact. As they pulled back to the edges of the Darsal system, Captain Elias Carter watched from the bridge of the Endeavour as the remaining Vectron ships withdrew, unwilling to risk further damage to their forces. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. "We did it," Lieutenant Moore said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. "We stopped them." Carter didn't respond right away. His mind was still racing, thinking of the Darsal, the lives they had saved, and the road that lay ahead. The battle may have been won, but the war wasn't over. The galaxy's powers were still watching, still judging, but Carter refused to let fear cloud his vision. "Send word to the Darsal ships," he said after a long pause. "Tell them they can head to the safety of the Outer Rim. We'll make sure the Vectrons don't follow." Moore nodded and began transmitting the message. Carter leaned against the command chair, watching the stars drift by on the view screen. The Darsal were free. For now. But the larger challenge remained. The galaxy would not forget the alliance between humanity and the Darsal. They would be watching closely, waiting for any sign of weakness. "Captain," Moore's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've received a message from the Galactic Council." Carter's brow furrowed. "The Council? After everything that's happened, they want to talk now." Moore nodded, a hint of unease in her voice. "Yes, sir. They want to discuss the future of the Darsal and our role in their recovery." Carter straightened up, his thoughts quickly shifting. The Galactic Council had been silent during the battle. They hadn't offered help, nor had they stopped the Vectrons. Now suddenly they wanted to be involved. It was clear that they saw the Darsal as a valuable asset, one they didn't want to lose to the Vectrons or to humanity. "Open the communication line," Carter ordered. A moment later, the face of a council representative appeared on the screen. The man was middle-aged, with short silver hair and a stern expression. His uniform was a deep purple, marking him as someone of importance within the council. "Captain Carter," the representative said, his voice cold. "We've been watching the events unfold. Your actions have drawn considerable attention, and while your bravery is undeniable, the Galactic Council would like to discuss the situation moving forward." Carter straightened, his hands folding behind his back. "What is it you want to discuss?" The representative paused, then leaned forward. "The Darsal are not a minor species. They are valuable, and their future is of great interest to many factions in the galaxy. If humanity is to continue its support for them, the Council expects certain conditions to be met." Carter's eyes narrowed. "And what conditions are those?" "First, the Darsal must submit to oversight by the Council. Their recovery must be monitored, and their technology must be shared. Second, humanity will be expected to take a less prominent role in their affairs. If you insist on continuing your involvement, we will require formal recognition of your role as advisors to the Darsal, with limited influence in their internal matters." Carter felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The Council wanted control over the Darsal's future, control over their technology, and most dangerously, control over humanity's involvement. It was a subtle way of forcing humanity out of the picture. "I'm afraid we can't agree to those terms," Carter replied, his voice calm but firm. "The Darsal have suffered too much already. They don't need more restrictions on their freedom. If the Council is truly interested in helping them, we'll do it together, on their terms, not ours." The representative's face tightened with displeasure, but he remained composed. "That is not a reasonable response, Captain. The Council will not tolerate such defiance. If humanity insists on standing in the way of the greater good, there will be consequences." "We're not afraid of consequences," Carter said. "We'll stand by the Darsal, no matter what the galaxy says." With that, the communication abruptly ended. The representative's face disappeared, leaving Carter staring at the blank screen. The tension in the room was thick. "Captain," Moore said cautiously, breaking the silence, "do you think the Council will follow through with their threats?" Carter sighed deeply. "They may try. But we've already proven that we're willing to stand up for what's right. The Darsal aren't going to be used or controlled by anyone, Not the Vectrans, not the Council, and certainly not anyone else. If the Council wants to fight us over this, then they'll have to. The room was quiet for a long moment. The crew knew that what they had just heard was a turning point. The decision to defy the Council would not be an easy one, and it would certainly come with a cost. But Carter felt a deep sense of responsibility toward the Darsal and toward humanity's place in the galaxy. "We've made a promise," Carter continued, looking around at his crew, "and we'll keep that promise, no matter what happens. The Darsal will have their chance to rebuild, and we will stand by them, together." Moore nodded. "Understood, Captain. We'll stand with you." And so, as the Terran fleet moved to the outer rim, escorting the Darsal ships into safety, Captain Carter knew that the true challenge was just beginning. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity's defiance. They had chosen a side, and now they would have to face the consequences. But one thing was certain: humanity's commitment to the Darsal was unbreakable, and that, Carter believed, would be the key to their victory. The events that had unfolded over the past few days had changed the course of the galaxy. Humanity, once seen as a minor force in the grand expanse of space, had proven itself capable of standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds. The Darsal, a race on the brink of extinction, now had a chance to rebuild and thrive. But the price of this victory was high, and the future remained uncertain. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The fleet was now far from the heart of the galaxy, deep within the outer rim. The Darsal had found a new home, a sanctuary where they could begin their recovery, away from the prying eyes of the Galactic Council and the Vectran Empire. But Carter knew that the peace they had fought so hard for could be fragile. "Captain," Lieutenant Moore said, her voice cutting through his thoughts, "the Darsal leaders are requesting a meeting. They want to discuss their future and how we can assist them moving forward." Carter turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Bring them up on the screen." Moments later, the face of a Darsal leader appeared on the view screen. His features were graceful, with large, reflective eyes and skin that shimmered faintly in the light. His presence was calm, yet his eyes carried the weight of a people who had suffered great loss. "Captain Carter," the Darsal leader said, his voice soft but firm, "we are grateful for the help you have given us. Your people have shown us kindness when others turned away. But now we must look to the future. We must decide what kind of society we wish to rebuild." Carter nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You have earned the right to choose your own path. Humanity will always stand by you, but the decisions you make are yours alone." The Darsal leader's eyes glistened. "We cannot forget the past, the pain, the destruction, but we also know that we cannot remain in the shadow of our former glory. We must build something new, a society based on unity, understanding, and strength, not just for our people, but for the galaxy." Carter felt a sense of pride swell within him. The Darsal were not only survivors, they were visionaries. They could rebuild, and they could lead. "We will help you with whatever you need," Carter said earnestly. "Our fleet, our resources, they are at your disposal." The Darsal leader bowed his head in gratitude. "And we will not forget this. The future will be bright because of your courage. Together, we will ensure that the mistakes of the past do not repeat." As the communication ended, Carter turned back to his crew. They had been through so much. But now, finally, it seemed like there was hope. The Darsal would rebuild, and humanity had become an ally to a race once thought lost forever. Yet, even as Carter allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction, he knew that the galaxy was still watching. The Galactic Council had not forgotten their defiance, and while the Vectran Empire had been forced to retreat, their hunger for control had not vanished. "Captain," Moore spoke again, her voice cutting through the silence. "We've received word from the Council. They're still pressing for our involvement in the Darsal's rebuilding process." Carter's jaw tightened. "They won't stop, will they?" "No, sir," Moore replied. "They won't. But they know we've already made our stance clear. They may try to influence the Darsal, but they can't force them to comply. Carter turned to look at the stars again. He had no illusions about the challenges ahead. The Council would push, and the Vectrons might regroup. But one thing had changed. Humanity's role in the galaxy was no longer that of a silent observer. They had stood up for what was right. And now, their reputation had spread far and wide. "We'll protect them," Carter said quietly, his voice resolute. "We'll protect the Darsal, and we'll protect our place in the galaxy. We're not backing down. Not from the Council, and not from anyone else." The crew nodded in agreement. They had fought side by side, and now they were a part of something much larger than themselves. The bond between humanity and the Darsal was unbreakable. It was a promise they had made, and they would keep it, no matter the cost. As the Endeavor drifted further into the unknown, toward the distant worlds of the Outer Rim, Captain Carter couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. The battle was over, but the war for the future of the galaxy had only just begun. Together, humanity and the Darsal would face whatever challenges lay ahead. They would stand together, united by a shared vision of peace and cooperation. The galaxy would never forget what they had done, how they had defied the powerful, and how they had given hope to a race that had been forgotten by the universe. And as the stars sparkled outside, shining like beacons of possibility, Captain Carter knew one thing above all. This was just the beginning. A new era was dawning, and humanity was ready to face it.